Good evening. Today marks a pivotal moment in American history. In a landmark decision today, September 19th, 2025, the United States Supreme Court ruled that former President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs were an unconstitutional overreach of executive power. This decision is set to have far-reaching implications. This judgment strikes down a key Trump-era policy and reasserts Congress's authority over taxation and trade, a power that has been debated for years. The ruling has immediate global consequences, fundamentally altering international commerce and American law. It sends ripples through the global economy, affecting trade agreements and market stability. The case centered on a crucial question: how much power should one person have over the nation's economy? This question has been at the heart of many debates. The justices concluded that the law used to justify the tariffs, meant for national emergencies, could not grant the president broad authority to set taxes on foreign goods. This decision reinforces the checks and balances system. For millions of Americans, tariffs once felt distant, but their effects were seen in everyday prices. The cost of living has been directly impacted. Now the issue is front and center, capturing the nation's attention and sparking widespread discussion. Tonight, we'll explore what this means for the economy, presidential power, and the constitutional principles that guide the nation. Join us as we delve into the implications of this historic ruling and its potential to reshape the future of governance in America. To truly understand the significance of today's Supreme Court ruling, we first need to break down what tariffs are and why they matter so much in global trade and domestic policy. At its core, a tariff is simply a tax placed on goods that are brought into a country from abroad. These taxes can make imported products more expensive, which can influence what consumers buy and how businesses operate. Governments have long used tariffs for several reasons: to protect local industries from foreign competition, to generate revenue for public spending, or as a bargaining chip in international trade negotiations. Tariffs can shape entire economies and affect millions of jobs. In the United States, the Constitution gives Congress the authority to set tariffs and regulate trade. This power is a fundamental part of the checks and balances in our government. However, during his presidency, Donald Trump took the unusual step of imposing tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of imports, especially targeting China, but also affecting long-standing US allies. This move marked a dramatic shift from previous decades, which had generally favored reducing trade barriers. The Trump administration argued that these tariffs were necessary to protect American national security and to push back against what it saw as unfair trade practices by other countries. This justification was controversial and sparked intense debate. Many American businesses, facing higher costs for materials and products, quickly felt the impact. They argued that the tariffs hurt their bottom lines and made it harder to compete, both at home and abroad. And as a result, a wave of lawsuits challenged the president's authority to act without explicit approval from Congress. These legal challenges claimed that the president had overstepped constitutional boundaries by bypassing Congress, which is specifically empowered to levy taxes and duties under the Constitution. The resulting legal battle quickly escalated, turning into a high-stakes confrontation over the limits of presidential power versus the authority of Congress. Ultimately, the Supreme Court was called upon to settle this historic dispute, weighing the balance of power at the very heart of American government. With today's decision, the court has redefined the boundaries of executive authority in trade, setting a precedent that will shape US policy and global commerce for years to come. The Supreme Court's focus wasn't on whether tariffs help or hurt the economy, but on who has the power to create them. The Constitution grants Congress, not the President, the authority to regulate commerce and impose taxes. The Trump administration argued that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, gave the president broad powers during a national emergency. They claimed unfair trade practices constituted such an emergency. Challengers countered that IEPA was never meant to override Congress's explicit authority over tariffs. They argued the law was for targeted sanctions, not sweeping taxes on imports. The court agreed, ruling that even in emergencies, the power to set tariffs remains with Congress. This decision is a major affirmation of the separation of powers. The Trump administration's defense centered on the need for a strong, flexible executive in a fast-moving global economy. They argued the president must act swiftly to protect American interests, and that IEPA was intentionally broad to allow such action. The administration claimed that combating unfair trade practices was exactly the kind of emergency IEPA was designed for. Supporters pointed to historical precedents of presidents taking bold action in foreign and economic policy. They insisted that limiting presidential tools would weaken America's global position. The president, they argued, is uniquely equipped to assess threats and respond decisively. Ultimately, they urged the court to trust the executive's judgment in matters of national security and trade. On the other side, American businesses and trade groups argued from the Constitution's plain text. They insisted that only Congress can tax and regulate foreign commerce, and that IEPA was never meant to grant the president such sweeping power. Their lawyers showed that Congress intended IEPA for targeted sanctions, not broad tariffs. Businesses described real-world harm, higher costs, layoffs, and threats to survival. They argued the tariffs were imposed without industry input or public debate, bypassing the democratic process. The challengers warned that letting presidents declare emergencies to impose taxes would set a dangerous precedent. Their victory today reaffirms that the power to tax must remain with Congress. It's a win for constitutional checks and balances. The Supreme Court's decision immediately lifts tariffs on billions in imports. For American companies, this means lower costs and potentially lower prices for consumers. The ruling removes years of uncertainty, allowing businesses to plan and invest. A major question now, will the government refund the billions collected in tariffs? If so, it could be a massive stimulus for affected companies. The decision also impacts American farmers and manufacturers hurt by retaliatory tariffs from other countries. With US tariffs gone, foreign markets may reopen to American goods, repairing trade relationships. Not everyone benefits. Industries like steel and aluminum, once shielded by tariffs, now face renewed competition. The economy returns to a more open, competitive market. While most economists see this as positive overall, some sectors will face tough adjustments. The landscape of American trade has fundamentally shifted. This ruling sets a powerful precedent for the future of presidential power and US trade policy. The court made clear IEPA cannot be used to impose broad tariffs. Future presidents must now seek congressional approval for major trade actions. This shift encourages public debate and collaboration between branches of government. Congress may become more assertive in reclaiming its constitutional authority over trade. America's allies are likely to welcome the return to a more predictable, rules-based approach. The decision signals that US policy is guided by law and institutions, not executive whim. It's a new era for the balance of power in Washington. Legal and economic experts are calling this one of the most significant separation of powers cases in decades, with far-reaching implications for how the branches of government interact and the limits of executive authority. Constitutional scholars say the court drew a clear line, emphasizing that the power to tax and regulate commerce belongs to Congress, not the president. This decision reinforces the foundational principle that no single branch can unilaterally control economic policy, especially when it comes to imposing or lifting tariffs. The ruling clarifies that emergency powers have limits. Declaring a national emergency is not a blank check for the executive branch. The court's opinion signals that even in times of crisis, constitutional boundaries must be respected, and checks and balances remain essential. Legal analysts believe this will lead to more responsible use of emergency declarations in the future, as presidents will need to justify their actions more thoroughly and work with Congress to address urgent issues. Economists largely welcome the decision, predicting lower costs for businesses and consumers and greater market stability. By restoring predictability to trade policy, the ruling is expected to encourage long-term planning and investment. The removal of tariffs should help ease inflation, lower prices on imported goods, and encourage both domestic and foreign investment, giving a boost to the broader economy. However, industries once protected by tariffs will face renewed global competition, which could lead to challenges for some manufacturers and workers who relied on those protections. Experts stress the need for policies that help American workers compete through innovation, skills training, and investment in new technologies, rather than relying solely on protectionism to shield them from global markets. The overall economic outlook is positive, but targeted support for affected sectors and communities will be crucial to ensure a smooth transition and to help workers adapt to the changing landscape. The decision marks a turning point for both law and the economy, setting a precedent that will shape future debates over the balance of power and the direction of US economic policy. This story is about more than law and economics. It's about the core of American democracy. The Supreme Court's decision reinforces checks and balances, ensuring no single branch becomes too powerful. Major economic decisions like imposing taxes must be made through open debate in Congress, not by executive order. The ruling has a direct impact on Americans' wallets. With tariffs gone, prices on many goods should fall. Small businesses in particular stand to benefit from lower costs and a fairer marketplace. Understanding decisions like this is key to being an engaged citizen. This case was about accountability, making sure government follows the Constitution. Staying informed and involved is our collective responsibility. The balance of power isn't just theory. It protects our economy and democracy. Today's ruling is a vital reminder. The rules and our engagement matter.